Do you think America is in trouble like hyperinflation? Because that is what Tucker Carlson is saying is coming to the USA. He's right now in Argentina looking at hyperinflation where inflation's at like 120% a year, and he says he's visiting there because this is a lesson for America, as that could be what happens to America next. And it's not just him. Guys like Michael Saylor, you know, the Bitcoin king, those guys are also saying this is what could happen in the US. And what could save you? Will it be gold or will it be Bitcoin? What will become of America? So how did Argentina get into so much trouble? As this Tucker Carlson guy tells us, Argentina used to be a very rich country, but he doesn't explain why it got to be so rich. See, what happens is, as we all know, at the turn of last century, United States became the richest country, most powerful country in the world. But however, due to its huge landmass, if the West Coast had to export anything to, say, Europe over here, Spain, England, United Kingdom, it needed to use shipping to go all the way around, right? South America, and that's where Argentina is, right? To go all the way around, and that's a pit stop in order to get its goods over there. And for United States on the East Coast, like New York, Washington, Massachusetts, anything they manufacture to go to Asia, which is where China and India is, it has to go all the way around here through, right, past Argentina as a pit stop, then come over here, right? Now you might be asking, why don't they just send it by road or rail? Remember, at the start of this last century, the 1900s, both road transport and rail transport were very expensive. So what happened is, basically you had to use shipping, which was a lot more cheaper. But then something came along and that made Argentina no longer important. What was it? It's the world famous Panama Canal. See, here's Cuba, here's Florida, here's Mexico. This is Panama. They drilled a little canal there so the shipping can go through here instead of all the... And that is why Madonna sang the famous song, Don't Cry For Me, Argentina, because it was all explained also in that movie. It was about that period in history where the downfall of Argentina started. But if you were to watch Tucker's silly little videos, he will tell you that it's because of socialism, because the government paying for everything, and because the government paying and printing so much money, that's created the inflation problem in Argentina. And as usual, Tucker only tells you half the story. What is the other half? The other half of the story is that basically countries like Argentina, a lot of South American countries, a lot of African countries basically don't own their own national resources. Like they could be rich with oil, they could be rich with gold, nickel, bauxite, aluminium. They could have all of that. But the people, the country doesn't own it. It's international or Wall Street money that owns it. See, here was back in 2012, the Argentinian president wants to nationalize the Spanish-owned oil assets. So basically, a lot of the oil, the largest oil companies in Argentina are not owned by the Argentinian people, but by the Spanish companies. And she goes on to say that Argentina was one of the few countries that did not control its own oil, such as, Saudi Arabia or United Arab Emirates, right? Argentina doesn't own its own oil. Basically, these large oil companies were sold off in the early 90s. And why was that? That's because the US likes to play these little financial games where they hike interest rates like what they're doing right now. And that would attract a lot of international money into the United States, which would push up the US dollar. And when the US dollar goes up, then the debt that these countries, Africa or Latin American countries borrow, they need to repay back more because now the US dollar is worth more and the interest rate is higher. So high interest rates, right? And they need to pay back more in US dollars, which means they go bankrupt. What happens when they go bankrupt is Wall Street companies swoop in, right? International money, such as the Spanish one we just saw, and buy these Argentinian assets very cheaply when they go bankrupt. Doesn't just happen to Argentina, happens to Africa, happens to parts of Asia, happens to, a lot of these countries every time during a Federal Reserve hiking cycle within the United States. So this Tucker guy is saying that the way to get Argentinian people out of poverty is by basically stopping communism or socialism in the country and letting the government spend as little as possible. Maybe he's right, but once again, he's only talking about half the problem, because who are the people or companies who actually own most of the oil assets, most of the assets within Argentina? It's not the Argentinian people. Who's the largest investor in Argentina? Right? It's Wall Street. It's non-Argentinian people. So what is the solution for countries like Argentina or a lot of these African countries, Latin American countries? Is it to go alt-right, like what Tucker Carlson is proposing, or is it to stay socialist, stay communist on the left side of the spectrum, or is there a third way forward? Let me know in the comments.